My son-in-law handed me a cardboard box and told me I had 48 hours to clear out of the house I'd built with my own hands. My daughter stood 3 feet behind him and said nothing. 4 days later, they were calling everyone I'd ever known, driving to every address in my contact list, leaving messages that started angry and ended in something closer to panic. I smiled when I finally listened to them. All 31 of them. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. The drive back from Algonquin took longer than expected. A transport truck had jackknifed somewhere near Huntsville, and the OPP had everything backed up for 2 hours. I didn't mind. 6 days of canoeing and portaging will do something to a man's sense of time. You stop measuring it the way city people do in minutes and meetings and start measuring it in light. How much is left in the sky? How much you've used? I pulled into the driveway sometime around 4 in the afternoon, still smelling like wood smoke and lake water, joined stiff from the drive, looking forward to nothing more complicated than a hot shower and the leftover chili I'd frozen before leaving. The first thing I noticed wasn't the house. It was the pile by the recycling bins. My toolbox! The good one. Snap-on, 40 years old, every socket still accounted for. Sitting on the curb like someone had set it out for bulk pickup day. Next to it, a garbage bag that had split open, spilling out what looked like the flannel shirts I kept in the basement closet, the ones Ellen had washed and folded before she passed. I sat in the truck for a moment with the engine running. Those are mine. It wasn't even a full thought yet, more like a reflex. My hand stayed on the wheel. The afternoon was warm for late September, one of those gift days Ontario gives you before it remembers. It's about to be November. A neighbor's kid was riding a bike down the sidewalk on the other side of the street, completely unconcerned with the old man sitting in his truck, trying to understand what he was looking at. I got out slowly. My knees don't love me the way they used to. The bag with the flannel shirts was just the beginning. Behind the toolbox, pushed up against the fence that separated my yard from the Delacroix families, there were more boxes. The kind you get from the liquor store, sturdy ones, the lids just set on top rather than taped. Someone had packed in a hurry or packed with the confidence of someone who didn't expect the owner to show up and ask questions. I opened the nearest one. My fishing rods. The Shakespeare ugly stick I'd had since before my daughter was born. The fly rod I'd bought myself the year I retired from the railway. Laid in sideways, handles jutting out, tips bent against the cardboard. Someone had packed 30 years of my life into boxes from the beer store and left them by the recycling bins. I pulled out my phone and called my daughter. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her voice, cheerful and recorded, the one she uses when she's performing normalcy for the world. Hey, it's Joel. Leave me something good. Joel. It's Dad. I'm home. My tools are on the curb and my stuff is in boxes outside. Call me back as soon as you get this. Right away. I tried the front door. My key went in, turned a quarter turn, stopped. I tried again the way you do when you're still hoping the universe is just having a small glitch. Nothing. They changed the locks. On my house. I stood on the porch I'd restained myself 3 summers ago and tried to arrange what I knew into something that made sense. My daughter and her husband lived here with me. Had for 4 years. I'd invited them after Joelle lost her job at the design firm and Marcus's landscaping business hit the kind of rough patch where rough doesn't cover it. I told them, come, don't worry about rent, let's get you back on your feet. 4 years. That's a long time to get back on your feet. I walked next door. My neighbor had been retired as long as I had, pottering around his property with the dedicated purposefulness of a man who never quite adjusted to not having somewhere to be. He came to the door before I finished knocking, which told me he'd seen the car pull in. Len, I said, what happened while I was away? He looked at me, then passed me toward my yard, then back at me. He's a decent man, Len. But he had the expression of someone who'd been told not to get involved. I didn't really pay attention, he said. You know how it is, busy with the garden. It was the end of September. There is no garden in September in this part of Ontario. We both knew that. Did you see them moving things out? I don't want to get in the middle of anything, Ed. There's nothing to be in the middle of. It's my house. My name is on the deed. He looked uncomfortable in the specific way people look when they know something and have decided the kindness of staying out of it is worth more than the kindness of telling the truth. Maybe give them a call, he said. Sort it out as a family. He closed the door gently, not rudely, just firmly. I went back to the curb and started moving my things to the truck. Methodically, the way I'd been trained to work at the railway, start at one end, work toward the other. Don't skip anything. The toolbox went in first, then the rods. Then I opened each box and made a judgment call. Keep, leave, examine later. Ellen's photo albums were in the third box. Her handwriting was on the cover of each one in black marker, 1987 to 1991. The kids, Muskoka, whoever packed them had at least kept them together, which I chose to interpret as an accident rather than consideration. I was sitting on the tailgate looking at a photo of Ellen at the cottage. She must have been 35, laughing at something off camera, squinting into the sun, when I heard the car. Marcus parked in the driveway with the ease of a man arriving at his own property. He got out without hurrying. Joelle was a step behind, the way she always is when she's letting him go first, into something she doesn't want to lead. I set the album down and waited. Ed. Marcus has always called me Ed. Never Dad, never anything warmer. From the beginning there was a formality there that I told myself was just his personality. Quiet, reserved. We didn't expect you back until tomorrow. Drive went faster than I thought. I looked at my daughter, Joelle. She was looking at the truck bed, not at me. We were going to call you, she said. We just needed to do this first. Do what first, exactly? Marcus took a breath. The particular breath of a man who's rehearsed this conversation in the car on the way home. Things have changed. We've been thinking about this for a long time. We need our own space. We've been feeling cramped. And it's not healthy for our relationship. Living with... It's just not working. You want me to move out. We think it's best for everyone. You can find a nice apartment somewhere downtown close to your friends. You're retired. You have your pension. The CPP, and the house. He paused, just briefly. We'll figure out the details. I looked at my daughter. She was still looking at the truck. Joelle, look at me. She did. Her eyes were dry, which was almost worse than if she'd been crying. There's a kind of distance people put on when they've made a decision and don't want to be argued out of it. She had that. She'd been wearing it for a while, probably. I just hadn't recognized it until now. This is our whole debt, I said, and your mother and I bought it in 1989. I've been paying the property taxes and utilities and the maintenance for 35 years. You've been here 4 years, neither of you paying $1 of rent, and you changed my locks. Marcus answered before she could. We've been contributing in other ways, taking care of the place. You've been living here for free while I paid for everything. That's not how we see it. There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before, or maybe hadn't let myself hear. Not hostility exactly, more like the confidence of someone who believes they're holding cards they haven't shown yet. Dad, Joelle said finally, the mortgage is paid off. We figured you'd want to downsize eventually anyway. This place is too big for one person. Too big for one person, I repeated. Your mother died in this house. Your grandfather built a garage. I have 35 years in this house. We know it's hard to hear. Marcus picked up one of the boxes I hadn't moved yet, making it clear, in the way that doesn't require words, that the conversation was over. There's a Budget Inn about 10 minutes east on the highway. You can stay there while you sort out next steps. I stood there for a moment. The afternoon light was doing what late September light does in Ontario, going golden and long, making everything look more significant than it is, or maybe exactly as significant as it is. My daughter wouldn't look at me. My son-in-law was carrying my belongings toward the curb with the confident efficiency of someone who'd been waiting to do this for longer than I knew. Something settled in my chest. Not grief, not anger, something colder and more patient than either. All right, I said. I picked up Ellen's photo albums, got in the truck, and drove east. The Budget Inn smelled like cleaning fluid and forced air heating, and the specific institutional neutrality of places built for people in between things. The clerk gave me a key card without making eye contact. The room was clean and completely impersonal and cost me $83, which felt like both too much and exactly what the situation deserved. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, not thinking about Marcus or Joel, thinking about Ellen. She would have known this was coming. She always saw things in Joelle that I made excuses for. The way she'd accepted help without acknowledgement since she was a teenager. The way she'd learned to absorb generosity as though it was simply her natural right. Ellen hadn't blamed her for it. She'd said once, quietly, "We made her this way, Ed. We gave her too much without asking for enough back." I disagreed, or pretended to. I set her photo on the nightstand and opened my laptop. I'd bought the house in 1989 for $10,000, which felt enormous at the time on a railway worker's salary and which people would laugh at now. The mortgage had been paid off in 2019. The property taxes were filed every year in my name. The deed, the title insurance, everything. It was all under my name alone. Ellen and I had discussed adding Joel when she moved in. Some vague idea about estate planning, but we never did it. And after Ellen passed, I never got around to it. I wasn't sure what Marcus thought he knew, but I needed to know what I actually had. Monday morning, I called a real estate lawyer whose office was in the professional building downtown, the kind of firm that has been there since before you can remember and will be there after you're gone. A woman named Audrey Pham took my call and made time for me at 11. She had the matter-of-fact competence of someone who has heard every variation of family land dispute and stopped being surprised by any of them. I laid out the documents on her desk: deed, property tax history, title record, the mortgage discharge from 2019, and told her what had happened. She read through everything carefully. "Mr. Stanton," she said, "you are the registered owner of this property. Full stop. Your daughter and her husband have no legal interest in the title. They are not named on anything. They've been living there 4 years. As guests or informal tenants with no lease and no legal documentation. They have no claim to the property itself. You have every right to require them to vacate." How long does that take if they refuse to leave? In Ontario, if they're treated as tenants, there are notice requirements. But given that there was never a lease, never any rent collected, and you are the registered owner who was effectively locked out of your own home, a landlord-tenant lawyer would likely advise a specific route. She paused. "There's also the question of the locks. Changing the locks on the registered owner is a civil matter. You could involve the police if you chose to." I hadn't thought about that. "What's the property worth?" I asked. She pulled it up on her screen without hesitating. "Similar properties on your street have sold in the range of $850,000 to $950,000 over the past 18 months. I'd bought it for $210,000. I'd paid it off with 30 years of early mornings and overtime and brown bag lunches at the railway yard. I'd redone the roof myself in 2004, the deck in 2012, the kitchen the year Ellen got sick because she'd wanted new countertops. And I wanted to give her something solid to look at." And Marcus had handed me a cardboard box and pointed me toward the budget inn. I asked Audrey to make me a full set of certified copies of the ownership documents. She had them ready by 2 o'clock. The realty office was 3 blocks north, one of the big national brands. I asked for someone who worked with motivated sellers and got a woman named Diane who had the focused energy of someone who loves her work and is very good at it. I told her I needed to list quickly, that the property would need to be shown beginning as early as Thursday, and that the current occupants might not be cooperative. She didn't blink. "As the registered owner, you have the right to list and show the property. I can contact them directly to schedule access." "They'll be surprised," I said. "That happens sometimes," she typed without looking up. "We'll work around it." I signed the listing agreement that afternoon. Diane said she could have it on MLS by Wednesday, and had already had 2 colleagues mention clients who were actively looking in that neighborhood. Then I drove to my buddy Ray's place in Barhoven. Ray and I had worked the same freight line for 22 years, retired within 8 months of each other, and stayed close the way men do when they share enough early mornings that small talk becomes unnecessary. He handed me a beer before I finished explaining the situation. "You're staying here," he said. It wasn't a question. A few weeks, maybe. As long as you need. He pointed at the garage. Your tools can go in there. I've got the space. I slept in Ray's spare room that night and the night after, and in the morning I turned off my phone. Not because I was hiding, because I had nothing to say to anyone yet, and the work was already in motion. Diane texted me Wednesday evening, listed. 2 showing requests already for Thursday. Photographer was great, place looks wonderful. Lovely home, Mr. Stanton. I read it sitting at Ray's kitchen table, eating the beef stew he'd made from scratch because he cooked the way retired railwaymen tend to, in bulk, with patience. Thank you, I typed back. Please proceed with all showings. I'll be traveling and unreachable for a bit, but you have my full authorization. I drove to Pemberton the next morning, a small town I'd been meaning to visit for years, up past Renfrew, where an old colleague of mine from the railway had bought a property and kept saying, come up, every time we crossed paths. I finally did. We fished the Madawaska for 4 days. The weather was cold enough that you could see your breath in the mornings, which is the right kind of cold for fishing. I turned my phone back on Thursday evening of the following week. 31 voicemails. I listened to them in order, sitting in the truck outside my friend's place with the heater running. The first ones were from Joelle. Controlled, demanding, the voice she uses when she's performing calm. Dad, there are realtors showing up at the house. Call me immediately. Then Marcus, Ed, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is our home and you can't just list it without talking to us. We need to speak today. By the second day, the tone had changed. The control in Joelle's voice had started to fray. Dad, we've talked to someone and they said, you're the only one on the title. I don't understand. Why didn't you ever tell us? Why didn't you say anything? Please call me. Marcus, by the third day, had dropped the corporate steadiness entirely. Ed, I'm asking you man to man. Whatever we did wrong, we can fix it. Just stop the sale. Please. Joelle is a wreck. This isn't what we wanted. The later ones were from numbers I didn't recognize. My sister in Sudbury. Ray, who I'd apparently forgotten to tell I was turning my phone off. A neighbor whose number I hadn't saved but whose voice I recognized. Jael must have called everyone she could think of. Near the end of the list, there was one from Joelle that was different from the others. Quieter. No performance in it. Dad, I keep thinking about when Marcus told you to go to the Budget Inn. I keep thinking about watching him say that and not stopping him. I don't have a good reason why I didn't. I don't have anything good to say about that. I know we messed up. I know what we did. Please let me know you're okay. I listened to it twice. Then I called Diane. 2 very serious offers, she told me. One young family, pre-approved, they toured twice and want to move quickly. They have a son and a daughter, bought their dog last month according to the wife, and fell in love with the backyard. The other offer is a cash buyer, investor type. Tell me more about the family. She did. The Bergmans. She'd already gotten their names wrong twice and corrected herself. He was a nurse, she worked in software. They'd been renting in Kanata and saving for 3 years. Accept their offer, I said. Whatever they need on timing, we'll accommodate. I drove back to Ottawa 2 days later, checked into a proper hotel downtown, had a full breakfast, and called Joel from the lobby. She answered on the first ring. Dad. Her voice, when she recognized it was actually me, went strange in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm in Ottawa. The house. Dad, people have been showing up. Realtors. A family came twice. Marcus talked to a lawyer. I know. Silence. The sale closes in 3 weeks, I said. You and Marcus will need to be out before possession date. The new owners have 2 children and they need time to move. Dad. Joelle. I kept my voice even, not cold, just clear. 4 years ago, I told you to come home because you needed help. I paid for everything without asking for anything back. I didn't resent it. I wanted to help you. And you changed the locks in me and handed me a box and told me to go figure it out. The line was quiet for a long time. I know, she said finally, very quietly. I'm not selling the house to punish you. I'm selling it because I don't want to come back to it. Too much happened there. I'm going to find something smaller, somewhere I choose for myself. That's what I should have done 2 years ago. Where will we go? That's not my problem to solve, sweetheart. It was mine 4 years ago. Now it's yours. You're adults. You'll figure it out. She started to say something and I waited. Is there anything I can do? She asked. Be out by the 28th. That's all I need. I stayed at the hotel another week, walked along the canal in the mornings, ate at restaurants I'd been meaning to try for years, called an old friend from the railway who'd retired to Prince Edward County and talked for an hour about nothing in particular. The kind of conversation you forget you need until you're in the middle of it. The closing happened on a Tuesday. The lawyer's office was warm and smelled like old carpet and printer toner. The Birdmans signed everything with the focused joy of people who still can't quite believe something this significant is actually happening to them. Their daughter had apparently already picked which bedroom she wanted. Their son was insisting on a hockey net in the backyard. When it was done, the lawyer slid a check across the table that made me think of every early morning at the railway yard, every Saturday I'd worked overtime, every vacation Ellen and I had not taken because there was always something the house needed first. $890,000. For the house I'd bought for $210. On the walk back to my car, I thought about Marcus handing me that cardboard box, about Joel standing 3 feet behind him and saying nothing, about Len closing his door gently and telling me to sort it out as a family. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me a little. The anger had burned clean somewhere up on the Madawaska, watching the river move over rocks. It had been moving over for 10,000 years. What was left was quieter, more like clarity. I'd spent 4 years being quietly necessary and quietly taken for granted. I'd made excuses for it the way you do, and the alternative is admitting that the people you love have stopped seeing you clearly. I told myself it was temporary. That family was complicated. That Joel just needed more time. All of that was true, and none of it had made the situation better. I drove north the following week, past Algonquin, past North Bay, up to a lake I'd found on a map 3 years ago and written down in the back of a notebook meaning to go there someday. I found a property for sale on the water, a small house, older, with a dock that needed redecking and a wood stove that needed servicing and a view that needed nothing at all. I put in an offer the same day. It was accepted by Thursday. Marcus never called me directly after the sale closed. Joel left one more message, just to say they'd found a rental in Barhoven, 2-bedroom. They were okay. I listened to it 3 times and wrote back a text. Glad to hear it. Take care of yourself. That was the whole message. It was enough. The day I got the keys to the lake property, I drove up alone. The October light was low and specific, the kind that makes the trees look like they're on fire from the inside. I stood on the dock for a long time in a coat that wasn't quite warm enough, and watched a pair of loons working their way across the far end of the lake. The dock needed work. The gutters needed cleaning. There was a section of fence along the back that had given up pretending to be a fence. I knew exactly how to fix all of it. I went inside, put the kettle on, and sat down at the table by the window that looked out over the water. Just sat there. No one expecting anything. No one keeping score. For the first time in 4 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I've thought a lot about the moment Marcus handed me that cardboard box. Not with anger anymore. That passed somewhere on the Madawaska, watching the current move over rocks that had been there 10,000 years before any of us started keeping score. What I think about now is how long it had been building without me choosing to see it. 4 years is a long time to make excuses for people you love. I told myself Joel just needed more time, that Marcus was private and difficult in the way some people are, that family goes through hard patches. All of that was true. None of it was the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler. I had been giving without asking for anything back, and they had learned, slowly and without malice maybe, that this was just how things worked. My generosity had become invisible to them because it had never cost them anything to receive it. That's not a judgment. It's just what happens when you never let people feel the weight of what you carry for them. What saved me wasn't luck. It was something I'd built over 40 years of the railway. The habit of keeping records, knowing exactly what you own and what you're owed, never signing anything you haven't read twice. That discipline, the kind that comes from decades of honest work and careful attention, is what put my name alone on that deed. I hadn't planned it as protection. I'd just been thorough. And thoroughness, it turns out, is its own kind of integrity. There's something I keep coming back to, though. When Audrey Pham slid those documents across her desk and said, "You are the registered owner, full stop," my first feeling wasn't triumph. It was grief. Because I hadn't wanted to need a lawyer. I hadn't wanted any of this to be a legal matter. I'd wanted a daughter who looked me in the eye when her husband handed me a box and told me to go find a budget inn. That was the real loss, not the house. But I didn't stay in that grief long. And I think the reason I didn't is that somewhere in me, through all those years of getting up before dawn and working past the point of comfortable and choosing to keep going when it would have been easier to stop, somewhere in all of that I had developed a stubbornness that isn't about pride. It's about knowing your own worth clearly enough that other people's decisions about it stop being the final word. Joelle called me after the sale closed. Quiet, no performance in her voice. I listened to her message 3 times. She didn't have anything good to say about what she'd done, and she said so. That honesty, late as it was, meant something. I wrote back 2 sentences. That was enough for now. The lake property needed work when I got the keys. The dock, the gutters, a section of fence that had given up entirely. I stood there in my coat that wasn't quite warm enough and looked out at the water and felt something I hadn't felt in years. The clean satisfaction of a problem that's mine to solve, on land that's mine to keep, in a life I'm choosing for myself. Some things you can only learn by losing them first. But some things, the real things, the ones that hold, you carry right through.